Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, I have a special guest with me because we are going to be ranking the catalog of the creators, the godfathers of heavy metal, Black Sabbath. So let me introduce my guest with me today. You should recognize this guy. He did our Judas Priest deep cuts. He did our Kiss deep cuts. Both him and me, we have a Black Sabbath podcast that we do together called Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. So I could think of no other person that I would want to do this with or that is qualified to do this. So let's say hello to Darren McCloskey. Hello, Darren.
Hey, meet again.
We meet again. This is the big one. This is a special one for us. Both Darren and I are very, very hardcore Black Sabbath fans and have been for a very long time. So, all right, some rules. No live albums, no compilations, but we did add The Devil You Know by the band Heaven and Hell onto our list because in our opinion, that's basically just Black Sabbath by another name. And I've done lists on Facebook in the past, and everybody, well, where would you have put The Devil You Know? So we thought, all right, we're just going to put it in here on the list and make it part, because for all intents and purposes, it's a Black Sabbath album. So, okay, 20 albums. Here we go. What do you got at number 20, Darren?
For 20, I have Forbidden. And let me just say that when I compiled this list, I approached it from, if somebody came to me and said, hey, I've never heard Black Sabbath before, where should I start? What albums should I begin with? What should I hear first? And that's how I made my list. So if I were recommending the entire Black Sabbath discography, the last one I would tell anybody to listen to would be Forbidden. And it's not a bad album. I just don't think it really, there's a couple issues I have with it. One, it doesn't feel like it's really a Black Sabbath band album. There's been different lineups, we're all aware of them. With this album, we had Tony Iommi, Tony Martin, but we also had, I believe, Neil Murray on bass. Hired hand, great bass player, but I mean, he was on Headless Cross, but I never really considered him to be a part of Black Sabbath. He does show up a lot of times in documentaries and things like that because he has worked with Tony and been a part of various incarnations of Black Sabbath, either in the studio or somewhere on tour, but I don't really consider him a member of Black Sabbath. Likewise, Cozy Powell, also from Headless Cross. I believe maybe he's played with the band a couple times in a live situation, but never really considered him a member of Black Sabbath. I believe he was also on Tier too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So there's that issue. I don't really consider it a Black Sabbath album. I consider it a Black Sabbath and Family or Black Sabbath and Associates, Tony Iommi and guests, but not really a Black Sabbath album. The material on the album, while the songs aren't necessarily bad songs, there's an element that's missing from most of these songs, and that's sort of that dark edge that was always very prevalent in Black Sabbath's music. I don't hear that as much. The material is decent, but it just doesn't sound like Black Sabbath to me. And then we have the presence of Ice-T, which, people are kind of polarized about that. Some people thought it was pretty cool. Some people thought it was inappropriate. I'm somewhere in between. I don't mind it. I think that it kind of adds a little bit of atmosphere, but it does give me pause. What was the motivation for doing it? Was it because Ernie C produced it? And of course, Ernie C and Ice-T were in Body Count together. It just seems like maybe that was more of a political thing for them to do. And also maybe trying to cultivate some of a contemporary audience outside of the Black Sabbath fan base, which, I don't know. I'm not really too cool with that. So those are mainly the factors that contributed to Forbidden being dead last on my ranking.
Yeah, I'm with you because that's my number 22 is Forbidden. And Black Sabbath is one of those rare bands for me that I don't think they have any real all-out clunkers in their catalog, a la, let's say, Judas Priest, where I would say there's a couple clunkers in their catalog. Same thing with Iron Maiden, has a couple real clunkers. But somebody's got to come in last. So
Yeah.
Forbidden, a lot of the same reasons you said. For me, and I actually, a lot of people, the first thing out of there, they say with this record is, oh, the mix. And honestly, I don't think that that's an issue with this album.
It doesn't diminish it for me at all. I mean, it could be better, but...
It could be better. But I know there's people out there, as of the filming of this, we're still awaiting a Forbidden remaster that's apparently done and just waiting to be released. But honestly, remastering this, remixing it, in my opinion, is not going to change the album for me, because the issue for me lies, the songwriting sounds tired, the band sounds tired. It sounds like pretty much what the album is, which was like a contract obligation. Tony Iommi basically had one foot out the door towards the Ozzy reunion. Tony Martin, not sure what's going on, if he's even in the group at this point. He shows up for the sessions. He doesn't know what's going on. They're telling him to write lyrics. He doesn't know there was rumors that Ice-T might have sang on the whole thing. So Tony Martin, he's not fully invested in it. Tony Martin sounds tired and a little bit hoarse to me, like maybe this is years of touring have started to catch up with his voice. The songwriting just sounds uninspired. Again, it just sounds like a band that's just at the end of their rope. They were at their popularity couldn't really get any lower at this point. The thing they were left with Dio, that falls apart. Ozzy, I can't remember if they had done, would they have done Live Aid at this point with Ozzy?
Oh, Live Aid was in '85, so yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. All right. So they had already flirted with Ozzy a couple times. There was always rumors of getting back together with Ozzy, and it just felt like an album that everybody knew the writing was on the wall, that this was just, it was done. And so for me, a remix, a remaster, this isn't going to change it. There are some cool stuff on it. I like Get a Grip, Can't Get Close Enough to You, Rusty Angels is kind of cool. I like Tony Martin when he sings ballads, or dark, if you will, slower songs. I don't know if you want to call them ballads, but so I Won't Cry for You is one that I really like off this.
That's a cool song.
Guilty as Hell is kind of fun. But again, it's just an album that it's really the only Black Sabbath album that I bought that I was disappointed in when I heard it. Of course, I like some albums better than others. But when I bought this, I was so disappointed, because what year did this come out? 93?
95, I believe.
95, okay. 95, we were knee deep in grunge, and I heard a new Black Sabbath album was coming out, and I thought, Black Sabbath has never let me down. And here we were in the middle of grunge, and I was like, I need something to remind me of the good old days. And I was like, okay, if there's any band that's going to do that for me, it's Black Sabbath. And I got this on cassette. I heard Illusion of Power, which Tony Martin sounds terrible on that. And at that point, I hadn't read any press or anything about it, so it caught me off guard. And all of a sudden, I hear Ice-T start rapping. I think I made it through another song, and I actually took the cassette and I threw it out my car window. That's how mad I was. I felt betrayed. Somewhere in Falls Church, Virginia, in a bush, is a cassette tape of Forbidden. I felt like absolutely betrayed. I was like, how could you do this to me? I put all my trust in you, Black Sabbath. How could you do this to me? Now, over the years, the album, so I have a thing about this record, but I've revisited many of times. I've come to peace with it. Me and Forbidden, we've sat down, we've talked it out. We've had a sofa chair psychologist there in the room with us. We ironed out our differences.
You want to work out your differences with this album. I get it. Um, here's the thing for me. Cross Purposes really impressed me. I remember I saw the album in a local record store, and before I bought it, I asked the guy there, I guess it was the store owner, and I really trusted his opinion because we talked, for whenever I buy something, we talk about what I bought, and we just talk about metal in general. And I said, I saw it on the wall, and I turned around and I said, how is this? He's like, it's excellent. I said, really? We're talking about Cross Purposes.
Okay.
And I said, okay, cool. Well, that's what I want to hear. So I bought Cross Purposes, and I really liked it. The first listen, it didn't blow me away, but the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. I saw them on that tour. They're fantastic. Tony Iommi and Tony Martin were both great. Geezer was on that tour. Oh, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, so I was primed for new Black Sabbath. I wasn't thinking that I needed, Black Sabbath to come out, from the closet and, save the day or whatever. I was looking forward to a new Black Sabbath. I really like Cross Purposes, and I was expecting more of the same from Forbidden. My reaction to Forbidden was not as extreme as yours, but I was kind of let down because it just felt sort of generic. Songs weren't bad. There was no real bad performances, but I just felt like it was a little bit generic. And that's the only thing that Black Sabbath has really ever let me down on, has been some of the generic sounding albums that, as we'll go through this list, I'll point out. And there's a few of them. So I didn't really feel betrayed. I was disappointed. There's always a chance that, the band's going to come back with a follow-up to a great album, and it's not going to be as good as the album that preceded it. So taking that chance, I sort of half expected it, and that was what basically happened. It just wasn't as good as Cross Purposes, a little generic, didn't have that dark aspect, it didn't have the dark Iommi riff thing going on, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, over the years I've come to appreciate it more, but it is without question my least favorite Black Sabbath album. So, all right, we're at 19.
19. Okay. So, The Devil You Know, was real excited about this. Heaven and Hell reunion. Bill Ward, Tony Iommi, Ronnie James Dio, Geezer Butler. Very excited about it. It didn't happen. There's a lot of reasons why. There's a lot of speculation as to some of those reasons why, but the first person to leave the fold was Bill Ward. So enter Vinny Appice. I love Vinny, great player. Some people don't. I've always loved Vinny. I think he's a real talented drummer. So I wasn't disappointed by that. Well, of course I was. I was disappointed that Bill Ward wasn't going to be in a band, but I wasn't like devastated, like, oh man, this is horrible. But I was really looking forward to it because I thought it was going to be more or less a continuation of Dehumanizer. The album just sounds, of the two, well, according to the ranking, I would take actually Forbidden probably over The Devil You Know, but the thing that brought it up a notch was the fact that it was Dio, and Dio's better than Tony Martin in my book. But the material just sounded pretty tired. The riffs just didn't do anything for me. It was a darker album. There's a couple songs that are pretty cool. Bible Black, I can feel some energy in that. The rest of it just sort of like it's mediocre. For this lineup, I was really disappointed. I really expected something at least every bit as good, if not better, than Dehumanizer, and it wasn't. So, number 19, The Devil You Know.
All right, well, we're 2 for 2. My number 19, The Devil You Know. Pretty much the same as you. I'm sort of surprised at how poorly this has aged for me. I think when I first got it, I was really excited and I liked it a lot more. And I do like Bible Black, Fear, and what's the Adam and Evil.
Adam and Evil's pretty cool.
The first 3 songs I think come out really strong, but then it just kind of flattens out for me. It reminds me a little too much of like the last so many Dio records where there's too many mid-tempo, sluggish type songs. The mix for me doesn't help the situation. It's too muddy and bass heavy. Bass the frequency, not the instrument. Vinny Appice sounds like he was just brought in at the last minute, like they recorded this with a drum machine and then sent him demos, and he just came in and had to play it
Yeah.
at the last minute. He doesn't
No,
sound like he was
no.
involved in the writing. It doesn't sound like classic Vinny Appice. The drum mix on it is nothing like a classic Vinny drum mix with the big toms and everything.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree there. It sounds kind of like you just sort of walk through it.
yeah, and yeah, kind of a disappointment. At the time, I really liked it. It just, for whatever reason, it just hasn't aged. It hasn't aged very well for me. I don't return to it very often, which is a shame because I like the band live, and I think the song sounded a little bit better live, but
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
recording,
yeah.
it just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't. It just didn't work for me.
We
So
saw him in 2007, and that was a great show. I mean, Dio sounded great. I don't have a complaint at all about that show. You know, it was great. Actually, that was before The Devil You Know came out. That was when they were doing. I guess they were
yeah,
touring for the what was it, the reunion album?
yeah, the greatest hits, whatever the Dio years.
Okay. Um,
Yeah, because they didn't play anything from this when we
no, they
saw them,
didn't.
and but they were playing all the deep cuts. So, I mean, it was exciting. I wish that if Dio was still here, it feels like they would have gone on to record some more things. So who knows where it would have went? But I think it was just, I don't know. It just lacked something. It hasn't aged particularly well for me. So that's why it landed so low on my list.
Yeah, I agree. Um, the only other thing I could add to that is that I don't think Dio sounded like his voice had aged. He didn't quite reach the highs that he had previously on other albums. Now, granted, I mean he was getting older, you know, and that range wasn't, you know, quite as good as it used to be. But live, man, I mean, you know, he brought it live. It just in the studio on this album, it just doesn't sound that great. Now it could have been that he was sick. Probably was.
Mm.
I don't want to be too
And the lyrics are also, the lyrics to me just don't.
yeah, lyrics just sound sort of like thrown together. They're not usually, you know, the usual Dio, very majestic and a lot of,
Right.
like, you know, symbolism. I mean, there's some symbolism, but it just kind of sounds like they're just throwing some phrases together just to, you know, get the job done. That's what it sounds like to me. So
Yeah. All right. What do you got at 18?
18, I have Tear. Now, there's some good songs on this, but again, I think it's not as bad as Forbidden, but it does have kind of that generic arena rock band or Euro rock band vibe to it. It doesn't really. There's some darker songs. There's some slower songs. Sabbath Stones is heavy, but it just kind of misses the mark for me. I like Jerusalem a lot, but I mean that's almost, it almost kind of sounds like a Blue Murder song. It doesn't really sound like Black Sabbath. It's a cool song, but and overall, I think the album, in much the same way I view Forbidden, is a good album musically. It just doesn't feel like Black Sabbath to me. Um, and that's really my only complaint with that. It's not a bad album, but I mean, you know, when I'm putting a ranking together and I went from album to album to album, I mean, Tear just kept moving further and further down the list until, you know, there it is at 18. And it's kind of unfortunate. What's the other song? Anno Domini?
And on Monday.
Anno Monday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally not even that familiar with some of the song titles. I've only listened to it maybe about 20 times since it came out in, what, 1988, 89?
Yeah. Late 80s, I think. Maybe even like 90. They might have been in the 90s at that point. I'm not sure. 89, 90.
I think it's a good album for Tony Martin. I think Tony Martin sounds really good on it. And I mean, as a showcase for Tony Martin, I think it's a good album. As a Black Sabbath album, as an album that I expect to hear some really cool Tony Iommi riffs and tone. Yeah, it's not there for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, my 18, I actually feel bad for putting this album this low on the list, 7th star, because I do really like it. It's just, for me, it's a little, I mean, we all know the story. It was supposed to be an Iommi solo album, and, got called Black Sabbath. I can still remember the day when I got it. It showed up in the mail as a cassette. And again, this is before the internet. So I looked, Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. What does that mean? But it's just a little too bright for me or something. I don't know. I can't. It just doesn't have enough darkness to it for me for a Sabbath record. I like Glenn Hughes, but he just doesn't feel. He never felt right to me as a Sabbath singer. If this was a Tony Iommi solo album, it makes total sense. But for me as a Black Sabbath album, it's a little, I don't know. But I do really like it. Like In for the Kill, Turn to Stone is great. 7th Star, the title track is great. Danger Zone is great. Heart Like a Wheel is cool. No Stranger to Love. I mean, I guess it's fun. But I mean, again, that's just kind of an example where it just doesn't really feel like a Black Sabbath album to me. So it just doesn't have enough of that dark Sabbath quality for me. So that's why it ranks kind of low on my list.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to get to that in a couple minutes.
All right. Well, we are at 17.
Okay, 17 now. Unpopular opinion. Number 17 for me is Headless Cross. I never could wrap my head around Headless Cross. I remember when the video for the title track came out on MTV, I thought, wow, this guy really kind of sounds like Dio. Cool. Kind of going for that vibe. And I could feel it. I could feel it from the song The Headless Cross. When Death Calls, it's a great song. Brian May guest lead guitar on that, which is really cool. Brian May is one of my favorite guitar players. Other than that, man, it has this production on it that it's just really it's really slick. I think it's overproduced. There's no grit.
Too much reverb.
Yeah. It's very I don't know what the word is. It's
dated. I mean, it sort of sounds dated. Like a lot of things that were coming out at that era. It could have been a Whitesnake record. It could have been some other 80s.
That's what I always say. It's more of a Whitesnake album than it is a Black Sabbath album. And it feels like that. It sounds like a Whitesnake. And I love Whitesnake too, don't get me wrong. But I don't want my Whitesnake to sound like Black Sabbath. And I don't want my Black Sabbath to sound like Whitesnake. When I want to listen to Whitesnake, I want to hear Whitesnake. When I want to hear Black Sabbath, I want to hear pure unadulterated Black Sabbath. And that's not what Headless Cross is. It's very, very homogenized. And I don't know what's going on with Cozy Powell's drummer. Cozy Powell's a phenomenal drummer. The stuff he did with Rainbow, Michael Schenker Group, and Jeff Beck, and the list can go on and on and on. On Headless Cross, it's like, what happened to Cozy? Did he break his arm or something? It's just it sounds like a drum machine. You could have told me anybody was on that album, and I would believe you. I don't think there's anything about it that, has that Cozy Powell mark on it. And overall, I think most of the instrumentation, most of the musicianship is pretty bland. Nightwing's kind of cool, but the production kills it for me. It's just so over the top, slick. I mean, people really get into this album, and I've tried. I mean, I really, really wanted to like it as much as everybody else, but it just doesn't work for me.
All right. I'll be talking about that soon. So we'll move on. 17. We're at 17. I feel bad for putting this at 17 too, but cross purposes. I feel bad because when this came out, I really, really loved it. It was going back to the Forbidden story where we're knee deep in grunge and got this. And I was like, yeah, man, Sabbath. Okay. Sabbath isn't they're not selling out. You know, they're still putting out heavy, classic sort of sounding albums. I think Tony Martin sounds great on this. Geezer's back in the fold, so that makes it sound more Black Sabbath, like sound more like Black Sabbath. But kind of farther in on the record, just some of the songs just don't, they're not as catchy for me as I would like them to be. I really like Eyewitness, Cross of Thorns. Again, I love Tony Martin when he does these sort of dark ballads. Cross of Thorns is one of my favorite Sabbath songs.
That's a great song.
Yeah, one of my favorite Iommi guitar solos too. Virtual Death is cool. Dying for Love is kind of cool. Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Cardinal Sin. I mean, it's a good record. I really like it. It's just, it's sort of towards the end of it. Some of the songs are just a little forgettable for me. The production, like you said, of this whole era of them is just sort of, the songs sort of blend one into each other. They're very samey. You know, there's just a lot of the same sound sonically across all the songs, so it sort of makes them sort of blend into one. And so it hasn't aged as well for me. Again, at that time, I don't remember what year this came out. Early 90s, right?
93.
Yeah.
93, I think. Yeah.
So in 93, when it totally worked for me in 93, and it made me think, all right, you know, here's Black Sabbath is still rolling strong, but just as time has gone on, it's just that it's an album that I don't revisit a whole lot, although there's some things that I do really like on it. So, and I remember getting the box set thing with the Cross Purposes Live, and that was fun. So it reminds me of that sort of early 90s. I do like the record. It's just, as time has gone on, I just sort of realized, you know what, there's just not as many good songs on here as I thought there were. So that's my 17. So we are now on 16.
Okay. So 16 is 7-star for me. I rank it a little bit higher than you do, obviously. Everything you said about it is true. Although I don't judge it as harshly based on those variables. It's definitely different. It doesn't feel like a Black Sabbath album. I don't think Glenn Hughes is the right fit, but I like the album. I just something about it that hits me the right way. I really love In for the Kill. It's a great song, very traditional, heavy metal in the spirit of like Rainbow. You know, again, it's not something that you would have ever heard on a Black Sabbath album prior to that. But, you know, I mean, I guess that's sort of the point of the album. It should have been a Tony Iommi solo album, but it wasn't. And I guess whoever the powers that be were decided that it wouldn't sell as well if it wasn't associated with Black Sabbath. And they were probably right. So be that as it may, it is, for all intents and purposes, a Tony Iommi solo album. But I like the performances. You know, and the songs are good. There really isn't a song on it that I don't like. I think the sequence of the songs on the album flow really well together. And I like Glenn Hughes' voice. I think he's a great singer, and he sounds great on this. I mean, what else can I say about it? It kind of surprises me that I like it as much as I do. When I first heard it, I wasn't really swept away by it. But I listened to it as recently as probably a couple weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. Sounds great loud. There's that more of a Tony Iommi. I mean, the production is pretty 80s. I think it came out in 86, 86?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
So there is a bit of that 80s sheen to it, but I can still hear that Iommi tone, and that at least sounds more like Black Sabbath than some of the other ones that are further down the list, like Forbidden, Headless Cross, and Tear. So, you know, again, an unpopular opinion. Most people don't like this album. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, if I had to score it, I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, and I probably would have done the same. Really, for me, seventh star and cross purposes, I could have flipped those two. It's just for me, cross purposes is a little darker, so it feels a little more Sabbathy to me. So that's the only way that cross purposes nudged out, got a little higher than seventh star for me. So,
Hmm.
all right, 16, my 16 tier. Uh, I'm kind of a sucker for big hooks, and maybe it's a little too much for some people, but I really like stuff like Anno Monday, big choruses. What else here? Jerusalem, another big chorus one. Sabbath Stones, Valhalla, another Tony Martin dark ballad feels good to me. Again, I like him in that kind of setting. So yeah, there's some really kind of big, hooky, catchy type songs on here. I agree with the things you said about it. The production is very dated. It's too slick. I kind of like the keyboards. It adds a different texture to it. When I listen to these Martin era albums, this and Headless Cross, I almost have to kind of put myself in a little bit of a different mindset and say, okay, this is not your
Oh yeah,
grandpa's Black Sabbath.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And when I sort of take them for what they are, uh, I'm kind of okay with it. I know there's another. What's the other? Maybe it's the Lawmaker.
Yeah.
You know, there's some things on here that harken back to some of the maybe Dio era type Sabbath stuff. So I'm a sucker for big hooks. It's a catchy album. Martin sounds really good on it. There's a lot of layered vocals and stuff like that. So that comes in at 16 for me.
Yeah.
But I
It's like,
couldn't really justify putting it any higher
no.
because, you know,
Yeah, you put it a little higher than I do, but I agree. I think we're right on the same page with Tier. I certainly don't hate it, and you're right. I mean, you can't qualify it against anything from the earlier years, and I wouldn't put it against anything that from the Dio era either. But I think that when you listen to it and you take it for what it is, it's a good album. I mean, there's some good songs, and I mean that's where I am with Forbidden and Headless Cross. It's not that the songs are bad. It's just that um, you know, I just rarely get the urge to listen to it. If I'm in my car or something and it comes on random shuffle, Lawmaker or something comes on, I'm like, oh, cool, yeah, it's a good song. And then maybe I'll get to the urge to listen to the whole album, and then I'll be like, well, maybe that was a mistake. I'm not really feeling that, as much as I thought I would. So it's just one of those albums. I think it's not bad. It's not great.
sometimes you're in the mood for it, you know.
Sometimes you are,
Right.
with Tier, probably a lot less than some of the other ones.
All right. We're at 15.
Okay, 15. 13. I was really, really psyched, and I'm sure you were too, about Ozzy coming back. Uh, and I remember you and I were like we were directly like linked up on this. I remember I called you the morning.
Oh, you heard they played God is Dead on
Yeah,
Sirius XM satellite radio or whatever, and you had that, but I didn't. So you listened to it and you called me right afterwards. I was all right. Well, how was it? What was it? Because
yeah,
we were just so excited to like.
yeah. I remember I was listening to it in my car on the way to work. I mean, I went all in on that. I was actually excited that Rick Rubin was going to produce it because I had thought several years earlier that the best person to produce modern producer that could really, I think, extract that really cool vintage Sabbath vibe would be Rick Rubin. I'm almost embarrassed to say that because it was such a disaster when it was all said and done. But the reason I thought that was because I liked what he did with Trouble. I mean, I liked the sound of the self-titled Trouble album and Manic Frustration. I thought that if he applied that to the Black Sabbath sound, we'd have something pretty cool. He didn't. It sounds really sterile. And again, I know you were right on top of this too. There's like It was really brick walled, which is really, it's pretty distracting. My biggest complaint with this is that it just sounds like somebody, probably Rick Rubin, sat down and gave them, uh, there's no inspiration, there's no originality to it. Basically, somebody gave them the directive to write an album that sounds like the first 3 or 4 albums,
Yeah.
predominantly the first 3 albums, because we have certain songs that are like token representations of former songs, uh, and that's annoying. The one thing about Black Sabbath, as we'll get further into this ranking, when we get higher or lower, when we get to the early material, there's no 2 albums that sounded similar, and there was no restrictions. Black Sabbath just sounded like Black Sabbath. It was mostly driven by Iommi's guitar, um, and Ozzy's vocals up to a point, 78, and then Dio took over. But there was never an album that sounded contrived. I never got the impression from any Black Sabbath album up until this time that they were trying to sound like what they thought Black Sabbath should sound like. And that's one of my biggest complaints about it. I do listen to it from time to time. I think it's pretty cool, in spite of what I just said. And a lot of it is just the idea that it is Ozzy singing with Geezer and Tony. And I'm such a fan that, I mean, they could sing the alphabet, they could play the alphabet, and I would find something redeemable about that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a fanboy when it comes to Black Sabbath,
Yeah.
but basically it's a pretty lame album, and I think um, most people would agree with that. Pretty disappointing album.
Yeah. All right. My number 15 is Headless Cross. Kind of the same feeling as I have with Tear. I think there's some really catchy stuff on here. Song Headless Cross, When Death Calls is great. I love Nightwing. Kill in the Spirit World is cool. But it's kind of the same. I always sort of lump Headless Cross and Tear together for me because production-wise, they're very similar production. A little too slick. I think the drums are too loud. I'm glad that you said something about the drums, because it seems like sometimes Cozy Powell is a great drummer, but on this record, yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work for me in the Black Sabbath context. The way the drums sound, they're just too loud. The production's a little too slick. I think Martin sounds great on it. I like the way they've mixed in some of the keyboards. There's a lot of cool songs on it, but I just couldn't justify putting it any higher than 15 on my list. So
yeah,
that's actually it isn't my highest Martin era album. I haven't gotten to that yet, but yeah, I know that there's some people that absolutely just adore Headless Cross, and I do think it's good, and it is an album that I do put on. And sometimes when I'm in the mood, usually when I'm in a mood for Tony, I'll get in these Tony Martin moods where that's all I listen to for a few days is Headless Cross, Tear, and Eternal Idol, and I'm just sort of immersed in that. But again, when you have a catalog as strong as Black Sabbath, it's when you have as many good albums as they have, it's in any other band's catalog, Headless Cross would be like a classic or really, one of their top albums. But when you're as good as Black Sabbath is, an album like Headless Cross lands in the bottom part of your list.
Yeah, I'm not sure if at this point they were trying to. I think a lot of interest had waned. I think that in this time that music was moving into a different direction. I think thrash metal was popular for the more aggressive side that that a lot of kids were listening to. I think there was also that kind of funk metal rock thing going on with Chili Peppers and stuff like that. So at this point, I think Black Sabbath were kind of like dinosaurs, and I don't know. Maybe it was different in the UK, but in the States, man, I just don't think anybody was really particularly interested in Black Sabbath.
No, new record label. They were on a new record label. They weren't getting the
IRS.
promotion. Yeah. And Cozy Powell came in, and I know that the attitude was, I think they were trying to reinvent themselves a little bit, try to get a stable lineup. Cozy Powell was, wanted to be part of the decision-making process. And I think because of his pedigree, Iommi respected him and gave him that, that leeway. But it just, you know, it sounds a little dated. It doesn't have the classic Sabbath. It has its own sound, so it's a cool album. Like I said, I like it, but it's just I couldn't justify ranking it any higher. And I feel bad because Tony Martin sounds amazing on it. I think Tony Martin never got quite the respect that he deserves. I know people compare him to Dio, say he's like a Dio clone. I don't really hear that. I mean, he sounds.
I don't hear that at all.
I guess he sounds more like Dio than he does like Ozzy, but in my opinion, I don't think he really sounds like Dio.
Tony Martin, and you know, we've already gotten a few albums deep into Tony Martin. Well, actually, let me go into my. So I'm going to go at. So we're at 14 now.
14, yeah. 14.
Okay, so I'm going to Cross Purposes is my pick for 14. And like I said, I liked it. I thought it was really good. I didn't have a lot of expectations for it. In fact, I didn't really know what to expect. But I thought the songs were good. I really like Tony Martin's voice on it. And man, Crown of Thorns, Cross of Thorns, it's a great song. Eyewitness is great. There's that Iommi riff thing kicking in. It's a good production. You know, it's a little modern for its time, but I think everything's mixed well. I mean, the guitars are right where they should be. I think the riffs are good. Tony Martin sounds pretty inspired. He's really belting it out. Got Geezer on bass. You know, I like it. I like it a lot. And I do revisit it probably more, well, more than some of the other ones I just mentioned. I won't say I revisit it more than any other Tony Martin album, but it's second to my first Tony Martin pick, which we'll get to very shortly. As an aside, though, where I started to go before I introduced Cross Purposes as 14, as an aside, my feelings about Tony Martin in his role in Black Sabbath, I think he was really valuable. I think what he did was he was almost like a Black Sabbath preservationist. He could do every era live, and he did it really well. He did it with such a great attitude. He would sing other people's songs the way a fan who had the ability to sing them well would do it, and that's what I appreciate. I saw Black Sabbath with Tony Martin twice, once on this tour and again on Forbidden. Both times the band was great. Forbidden was a little weird because we had Neil Murray on bass and Cozy Powell was on drums. It was just felt a little disjointed, but it was a great show. And what you mentioned about the Forbidden tour was that they were really waning in popularity. So the venue was supposed to be, I think we were supposed to see them at the Tower Theater in Upper Darby, Philadelphia, and then it got moved to a much smaller club. So Greg and I went, and Greg Diener, and we were like about 6 feet away from Tony Iommi, which is pretty awesome. So unfortunate for them, fortunate for us. But seeing them on Cross Purposes was great because you didn't know. I mean, anything was good to go. Tony Martin sang "Sabbath Bloody Sabbath," "Symptom of the Universe," "Mob Rules," "TV Crimes," songs from Cross Purposes, songs from "The Eternal Idol." You know, it really felt like a Black Sabbath concert. Maybe a little bit like a tribute in a way. But on a Cross Purposes tour, it was cool because you had Iommi and you had Geezer. So, you know, you had those two bookends. You had the new guy, Tony Martin, who was doing a really good job at presenting the entire Black Sabbath catalog, which I appreciated. And, Bobby Rondinelli back there kicking ass on drums. So it was a good time for Sabbath, I think, considering, you know, all things considered. I think it was a good time for Black Sabbath. It was a good album for Black Sabbath.
Yeah. All right. Number 14 for me is the album 13. At 14, I got 13. Same feelings as you. I don't like the Brick Wall remaster. It, it's upsetting that they played it so safe on this. You can sit here song to song and go, okay, this song is Black Sabbath, and the end of this song is the end of Dirty Women, and this song is NIB, and this song is Planet Caravan. So it feels like a real cop out in that sense, that they just, went up painted by the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I feel a little guilty because it's Ozzy, it's Tony, it's Geezer, and it feels like a guilty pleasure. It's the guys. It sounds more like Black Sabbath than some of the albums that I've mentioned before this. So it's kind of a guilty pleasure. I've listened to it a ton. It's an album that I do have fun with. Dear Father, I really like that one. I like, what's that bluesy jam one? Live Forever.
Yeah.
Is really cool. The bonus thing that they put out with the 4 extra songs, I think there were some songs on there that maybe if they'd been swapped into here. So guilty pleasure because it's Ozzy and it does sound a little more like Black Sabbath, but it loses points for the mix and it loses major points for just the lack of going for it and taking some kind of chances. But maybe at this point in Black Sabbath's career, that was really the only way you were going to get an album out of them, was to just have a sort of play by the numbers, scripted out thing. And Rick Rubin is good at that. Rick Rubin is a guy that comes in and revitalizes people's careers. And what he does is he basically takes an artist, finds when they were popular, and just tries to duplicate that and replicate that. And I guess in that sense, he did a good job. The mix is really stripped down. No Bill Ward. What would Bill Ward have contributed to the record? I don't know. From a drumming perspective, I don't think it really would have changed anything. Maybe if he might have been somebody that pushed them to be a little bit more creative, I don't know. But I think at this point, Sabbath, with all their managers and accountants and lawyers, and this album was probably scripted out before they even, really walked into the studio. It was all figured. They knew what they were going to do. They're, like you said, they're going to make an album that sounds like the first 3 Black Sabbath records. But it's still a guilty pleasure. It's Ozzy. There are moments on there that make me smile. There's some cool riffs. I mean, that's how it landed at 14 for me.
Yeah, I mean, it has some redeeming value, but it's a cash grab. I mean, it's essentially what it is. Ozzy didn't need to do it. I mean, I don't know if Tony Iommi really needed to do it. He probably needed to do it more than Ozzy needed to do it. I mean, Ozzy's solo career, of course, has always been pretty consistently strong, regardless of the quality of the albums. I think there's always a lot of people, tend to buy Ozzy. Ozzy always remains relevant, has always remained relevant. He puts out albums some better than others, but Ozzy probably didn't need to do it. I'm not sure what the decision was, but it was definitely something that didn't seem very inspired, and that's probably my biggest problem with it. However, I do like Loner a lot. I think that's a pretty cool tune. It's very NIB-ish. That's the NIB representation on this album, but I like it. I can hear Geezer lyrics in that. It's very Geezer, and the lyrics actually are pretty cool. I mean, I can hear where Geezer's coming from. God is dead. Certainly, that's Geezer. And Loner definitely gets into that more of a mental thing that Geezer would get into from time to time over the course of his time in Black Sabbath. So I can identify that as probably a pretty authentic Black Sabbath sort of a thing. Probably the most authentic Black Sabbath song on 13 would be Loner.
Yeah. All right, we're at 13. We just did album 13. Now we're at number 13.
Yeah. No, 13 for me is Born Again. And man, I hated this album for a long time, and there's a lot of things to hate about it. Okay, so coming from Mob Rules, which I'm going to gush over probably in about 15, 20 minutes or so. But let me just say that coming from Mob Rules to Born Again was just an awful feeling. Expecting, you know, something that would be somewhere in the same ballpark, and then what the result was really just, it was gutting. It was like, oh my God, really? I mean, it was almost like it was a joke. I remember I bought it and I was excited about it. I remember, you know, Ian Gillan, I was a Deep Purple fan, you know, 14 years old. You know, I was into Deep Purple. Black Sabbath was my gateway to a lot of, you know, that you know, classic heavy rock. And I was really excited about the prospect of Ian Gillan singing for Black Sabbath. I mean, it's like the combination of two of my favorite bands, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. How awesome is that going to be? It really wasn't. But the songs themselves just sounded like they were just kind of thrown together haphazardly. There's the intermission, the sound effect songs, and I'm pretty much working off my long-standing impression of this album. These are the things that bothered me. The production was so muddy. It was not any clarity. I mean, I could hear the presence of bass, but I couldn't hear any definition of what Geezer was doing. The drums are there, but they're really reverbed out. Not really any clarity there. The tone of the riffs was pretty cool, but there wasn't enough articulation to really understand what was happening. The whole thing together was like a swirling black mess, and it was distracting to listen to. And then on top of that, Gillan just wailing over it like he just didn't really care. This was just a fun thing he was doing. He wasn't taking it as seriously as he would anything else he'd done. And if you compare Born Again with, we don't even get into the Deep Purple era, compare it with what he was doing more recently in his solo album, and there was just a lot more care into his lyrics, the way he sang, more control over his voice. With this, it was just like, maybe he was drunk, maybe he just didn't care, maybe he was just all in the spirit of fun, but all that was out the door. All of, you know, there's certainly the Deep Purple legacy, his great solo career, none of that was even present on Born Again. It's just a mess. And for years, I would just, it would blow my mind when people, and there's a lot of them that would like rave about this album. And I think a lot of it had to do with most of the people I'm talking about are our age. And I think it was probably the first album they heard. And it made an impression on them because of that. But when people would rave about it, I would just be like, my God, are we listening to the same album? This is just a mess. And I expect so much more from these people. You know, and I just felt like I was, basically, in a nutshell, I felt like I was ripped off when I bought that album. So fast forward several years later, I revisited it again. It was actually one of the last Black Sabbath albums I bought on vinyl. I just was never in a hurry to get it. I knew I'd never really listened to it. I had it on CD, and I listened to it occasionally, but not very often. But I found it on vinyl. I decided that I wanted to get all the Black Sabbath albums on vinyl, and I'm still working to finish that. A couple I need, but Born Again wasn't that hard to find, and I bought it. I took it home. I listened to it. And I kind of turned a corner with it. It's definitely dark and muddy, but I mean, some of it kind of works. I mean, the intro, what is it? The dark, and then it goes into Zero the Hero.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. After all these years, I don't hate it as much as I used to. I've kind of warmed up to it. But I will say from the beginning, the one song that I really did like was Keep It Warm. I love that Tony Iommi riff in that. It's just raw, and it just has that tone. I think it's one of the best riffs he's ever come up with, and he's got a lot of good riffs. But that one, man, that's a killer riff. I just wish that it had been presented in a better context and with a better production. But maybe it might not have sounded quite as good. So that would be the only thing about Born Again that I would say kind of sort of works. Hotline's cool. Digital Bitch I can live without. Trash I can live without. The title track is very cool, you know. So probably if you'd asked me last year where I would rank this, it might be around 19 or 20. But at this point in time, I put it at 13.
All right, I'll save my thoughts for that record for when I get there. But yeah, certainly the mix is the one thing that everybody. That's the first thing that usually people say about that record. The mix is just crazy, weird, bad, however you want to put it, strange.
It had to have been on like heavy drugs or something because
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of. We'll let people, to tell stories behind that where finger pointing and nobody knows, one of those things. It reminds me a little bit of Live Evil, where there was a lot of finger pointing, like he did this, no, he did this. That's why it sounds like that. But,
yeah. When I say on drugs, I mean that kind of like not literally. I just mean that as an expression. Like what were they thinking? And I'm sure they had a good budget. I mean, Warner Brothers put that out, and they were, they were still,
yeah.
I'm sure they had to have pretty respectable sales for Warner Brothers at that time. And I think probably on paper, it sounded like an amazing thing. Oh my God. Guess who Black Sabbath has? Guess who's going to be singing on the next Black Sabbath album? Who? Ian Gillan. No way. Oh my God. That's going to be incredible. Yeah, I know. It came out. Man, what's going on? Guys
Yeah.
they were sleeping when they did this. Very disappointing.
All right, my number 13 is The Eternal Idol. This is my favorite Tony Martin album. To me, it sounds, well, the story, Ray Gillan's supposed to have sung on it. So Martin wasn't involved in any of the songwriting in that respect. Bob Daisley is on this. Bob Daisley, one of my favorite bass players. Bob Daisley contributes lyrics. I love Bob's lyrics. So this album feels to me like it could have been during the Dio era, or it could have been somewhere earlier in their career. I like the album cover. The Shining is awesome. Hard Life to Love, Nightmare, Lost Forever. I love the title track, Eternal Idol. Ancient Warrior. I like all the songs on this. Yeah. So this is by far my favorite.
Very cool.
Favorite Martin era album. I think the drums are maybe a little too, the snare drum is a little too sort of Def Leppard-y, cyborgy sounding or something, and maybe, but I really like it. It's an album that I loved it when it came out, and I still love it today. My favorite Tony Martin album, The Eternal Idol.
Mm-hmm. I agree pretty much with everything you said, and then I'll add to that. That's coming up really very soon for me.
All right. Well, we're at 12.
12. Never Say Die. It's got the lowest ranking of any Ozzy era record, and I've gone back and forth with this. I probably like maybe a year or so ago, I probably would have ranked it a lot higher. But I mean, more and more, I'm just finding more that I have less of a desire to listen to it. It's really it's pretty convoluted album. You can feel everybody kind of pulling apart, which is pretty much exactly what was happening in the band at the time. I think that Iommi was definitely feeling pretty important in the grand scheme of things, probably more important than other people, certainly more important than Ozzy, who had already left prior to the recording of the album. Of course, that they worked with some other singers. But the album just sounds, it sounds like a band in distress. There's some jazzy things going on in it. The overall tone, it just sounds kind of desperate to me. When I go song to song, the title track's cool. It's very up tempo. It kind of is, to me, it kind of communicates that, probably more so for the time that it came out, in the context of the time that it came out, probably like Never Say Die. Yeah, we almost fell apart, but we're back, and we're Black Sabbath and we're gonna do it. Here's our song, Never Say Die, and this is our album. And it's like, yeah. It kind of diminishes pretty quickly after that. Johnny Blade's pretty cool. I'm not really hip to the keyboards for that era of Black Sabbath, at least that prominent. Now I know that they're present in other songs earlier in the catalog, but that doesn't bother me as much as the keyboards in Johnny Blade. It's just really too a little synthy, and I know Who Are You? There's synth in that, but we'll get to that. But Johnny Blade is just it just sounds strange to me. I like Junior's Eyes a lot. Over to You is cool. Air Dance doesn't do it for me. Swinging the Chain is pretty cool. You know, I like Bill Ward singing. I always have time to hear Bill Ward's voice on the song. Breakout, I hate that song. I never warmed up to that, and I never will. So
that's your Illusion of Power. That's my Illusion of Power. For me, is my least favorite Black Sabbath song. Breakout for you.
And I've tried, like really sat there and no Breakout for me. I just think that it was very indicative of where the band were at their career. Certainly lifestyle issues was pulling things apart. And it's pretty evident on that album, probably more so than any other Black Sabbath album that certainly had lifestyle issues involved with it. This is the one that I think was the biggest detriment in their discography. Never seen. They should have just said die. Taking some time off, dealt with their issues, rejoined, got everybody back on the same page. What really should have happened. But if that had happened, then we wouldn't have had the next era of the band, and we'll get into that soon enough.
All right, number 12 for me is Dehumanizer. I really like this record. I mean, at this point now, we're getting into the albums that I like. All these albums, I can't really find any huge major faults with it. Computer God is awesome. Letters from Earth, I love that. Super heavy. The album has a real kind of dark, sludgy sound to it, which I think is really cool. What else? TV Crimes is cool. Master of Insanity. Too Late. I Love
Oh my God.
To me, that's like Dio. I love when Dio does that sort of, I am monster, I am great. When he does that kind of, that's just a great Dio tune.
Definitely.
Buried Alive is cool. It has, and it's at that time with the grunge and everything going on, I wouldn't say they were trying to sound like that, but it does have kind of a sludgy sound to it at times. So I think it's really cool. I like it. I don't like it better, obviously, than the other two Dio era albums that they did before this. But I think it's a really cool record, and I think it's really heavy. It's got some real dark, heavy riffs on it. Dio has some real menacing stuff on it. And where on The Devil You Know, it seemed like Dio tried to not do the rainbows and that kind of lyrical theme. He did the same thing on Dehumanizer. He tried to do something different lyrically. It works on Dehumanizer for me. It doesn't work for me on The Devil You Know. I think that the lyrics on this, I think, are great. They're a little more earthy, a little bit more contemporary, maybe, I don't know. But the whole like theme, computer god theme at that point in time, the internet just showing up, that whole thing. It's just a cool record. I really like it. Lots of heavy riffs, great Iommi stuff on it. Geezer has a lot of really cool bass playing on it. Dio sounds in top form. So
they all sound great. It's a great album, and I think the lyrics are socially relevant, but they also sound pretty inspired. They're socially relevant, but in a way where you can tell Dio felt like inspired by maybe what was going on around him or the concepts that were going on in his head at the time. But he really, it's dark. It's not rainbow, and but it's not his solo. Doesn't feel like his solo material either. It's very decidedly Black Sabbath, but it works. Well, I'll get to that in a few minutes too.
All right. We're at number 11.
11 for me is Eternal Idol. I love the album too. You know, everything you said about it, I agree with. I do like the drums though. I think Eric Singer's a good drummer. He's kind of like Cozy Powell in a way, where wherever he is, he never overplays. He's always pretty much in the pocket, but he'll very often he'll do something that's sort of like a little signature fill, or just some sort of like personality performance thing that he does, where I can recognize, oh, that's Eric Singer. And I respect that, because he doesn't try to take over, or he's not longing for attention. He plays for the song, but he's good enough where he can keep it simple, keep it effective, but also have his personality come through. And I think Cozy Powell was similar to that. Not in exactly the same way as Eric Singer, but I consider those two drummers pretty comparable. The songs are great. There really isn't a bad song on the album, I think. I wish the Headless Cross was more like Eternal Idol. I love The Shining. I love Glory Ride. That's one of my. It doesn't sound like a Black Sabbath song, but I love it. I mean, I love the driving vibe to it, and love the drums. The chorus is awesome. Tony Iommi plays great. Good tone. You could hear it's Tony. There's that, the personality in his playing it sounds inspired. As you mentioned, Bob Daisley's on it. He's playing bass. He's writing lyrics. It's cool. It's a good album. And I snoozed on it for a number of years, and I guess probably because I wasn't really that impressed with Headless Cross. I expected. The album cover didn't do much for me. I thought the logo was kind of lame. And, at that point, I was still pretty much in the headspace where I'm going to judge, what this album is all about based on the presentation of the album cover and whatnot. And I just wasn't really that impressed with Headless Cross to really give it a chance. And, so I snoozed on it. When I did get it, I think I saw the video for Shining first, and I thought, this is pretty cool. And then I picked it up and I listened to it, and I was really surprised at how good it was. And I've liked it ever since. And I spin it pretty frequently. And it's my favorite Tony Martin era album as well.
Cool. All right. My number 11 is Born Again.
Great album. I love that album.
I can certainly see where you're coming from with your comments and thoughts on it. And certainly the mix is.
The album cover is awesome too. I love that album.
I think part of it is, and I should look here to see what year this came out. See if I can. It's so tiny, I can't see it here, but I know it's like
83.
83?
83.
Wow, okay. For me, I think the songs get past the mix for me. I love Trashed. I love Keep It Warm is a deep cut Sabbath number for me. The song Born Again. Disturbing the Priest, Zero the Hero is great. I love Gillan on this. I think that whereas on Headless Cross, Tony Martin kind of forced the lyrics to sound like Black Sabbath, Gillan manages to straddle that line where they still sound a little Black Sabbath like, but they don't sound forced, like things like Zero the Hero, Disturbing the Priest, song Born Again. He's not singing about goblins and castles and stuff, but it still has sort of it just works for me. And with the screams and everything, the riffs are heavy, even though the mix is distracting. It's almost at a point where I've listened to this album so many times that if it were to be remixed, it might almost lose something for me. It's like I've come to accept it in this bizarre, weird shape and form that it is, and it's just
I'd give it a shot.
Yeah, I would certainly buy it and listen to it. It's a strange album. The album cover is strange. The pairing of Gillan with the band is strange. The mix is really strange, but it all kind of works for me. I love the little interlude things, Stonehenge in the dark. To me, it just has that creepy Black Sabbath vibe. The cloudy, messy mix adds to sort of the weird vibe to it. I remember seeing the video for Trashed with the guy running through the cemetery and running into the church. And to me, that's what this album feels like. It's like a cold, damp, English September night or something like that. That's kind of what the whole album has, that kind of feel to me. You know, they recorded it in a castle or something. You know, it's just a moat. It's dark. It's cloudy. It's muggy. So that's kind of, I don't know. I just have a special place for this, and probably some of that too has to do with when I got it, my age. I was totally into them at that point, and so I was going to love pretty much anything that they put out. So
I think that's probably where a lot of people that really like this album, I think that's pretty much where they're coming from. Is their maybe their first impression with Black Sabbath. They were old enough to buy a new Black Sabbath album.
Yeah.
And this was the one they got. So there's an emotional attachment to it. It wasn't the first Black Sabbath album I got, so I have no real attachment to it, other than being disappointed because I love Mob Rules so much, and then to go from that to this. I agree with you. It does kind of, visually, mentally, it does kind of, it paints a picture of like a castle and, stone walls and, very damp and dark. And the production would work if it were just a little bit murky, or just that sweet spot of being murky, but still have some clarity. It's too murky. I mean, if they would have just dialed that back, I think they would have had a brilliant album. And still would be polarizing because of the differences between this album and anything that happened before in the previous eras with the Dio and the Ozzy. It's much looser. You talked about Gillan's lyrics. I mean, there's no cohesion whatsoever with any of his phrases. It's all over the place. It's like somebody said, like he was reminded maybe a week before that he was going to record a Black Sabbath album at the Manor. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, are you still going to do it? Oh yeah. Did you have all the lyrics written? Yeah."
It is kind of a word salad.
On the way to the studio. I mean, there's just no cohesion whatsoever. I mean, you read the lyrics and it's like,
it is kind of a word salad at times. And I love in Trashed when he does to hit the bottle again, but there was no tequila. So we went back to the bar, again, but there was no tequila. It just repeats.
It's that phrase again. And it's like, he's such a great singer. And that song in particular is probably, that was the one I had the hardest time getting past was the way he sung Trashed. And like, it felt like it was just way off center. It just sounded like, it just didn't have any sense of balance to it. The voice was just, I didn't like the way he sang it. I didn't like the way he phrased it. And Tiki, it's just like, I had a hard time wrapping my head around that, especially like, as I said, I had a lot of respect for Gillan as a singer, and certainly in Deep Purple, but I also liked his, what I heard at that time from his solo stuff, and then to hear him do this, it just sounded so haphazard, and it's just like, I don't know. The whole thing just seemed like it was a ripoff. But like I said, coming back to it after so many years, it has its redeemable qualities.
Certainly can't argue with anybody when they say they don't, care for the record, because I can understand that.